I am Lena London, and you're watching The Lena London Show. Thank you for stopping by. Hi, guys. I'm Lena London, and you're watching my channel. This is the Lena London channel. And I read a book the other day by Kurt Vonnegut. This is probably the second or third book that I've read by him. And I kind of tracked down every book he's written on eBay, and I'll probably read them all. But anyway, this book, Breakfast of Champions, I think it kind of applies to today's times. It has a lot of good social commentary about how the American government began and how the government affects the way society has shaped throughout the last however many hundreds of years, and how people within our society are treated, race relations. There's so many things going on in this book. It was written in the late 70s. It was published in early 70s, 1973. So that's kind of why, if you read this book, you'll know that he uses a lot of slurs in it. He uses nigger a lot with an ER. And so I found myself, I was flowing through the book, and maybe as it built up, the more and more I used it, I felt maybe a little uncomfortable. And then I started to think, is Kurt Vonnegut a racist? And so I started researching on Google and trying to find interviews and things like that to figure out his background and more about him. Because I really like his writing style, and I didn't want to support a racist. And then with an open mind, I felt, who am I to censor this writer's art? And also, he clearly acknowledges the inequality that's gone on in this country and around the world, and he's very aware, and he writes in a very let's see, he writes in an easy vernacular, so most people can understand him. And I don't think he is a racist. I think he was staying true to the times in which he was raised. He was born in the 20s or something like that, and he died in the 90s, maybe 97, I think, or 2007, something like that. 2007, sorry. Yeah, he died in 2007, not in the 90s. I was thinking of Kurt Cobain. But I think he was staying true to the characters of his parents, to the place in which he lived, where he grew up. Even though, because if you've read this novel, you'll know that he inserted a lot of himself in this book. It weaves between the characters and himself towards the end, and he's also the narrator. It's a relationship between a bunch of different characters and his own life. And I think when you are creating characters in general, sometimes they contain a little bit of you anyway. But in this book, in Breakfast of Champions, the characters, I think, definitely mirrored bits of his life as he wove his life into this narrative. He gave us information about his mother and her suicide, and his father and his family, and how they felt about people of color, black people, and the racism that he was raised around. And I think when he got older and was able to think for himself, again, because you can clearly see from the first two chapters, at least, of Breakfast of Champions, that, again, he's aware of the United States' sordid past, especially with regards to slaves and slavery and Native Americans. And something that stood out for me was when he said, and I think it was in chapter 1, he was talking about how, here it is. Okay, so he says that, and this is how he's talking about how the United States was formed and how it was discovered by Christopher Columbus, and how the United States treated slaves, basically. But he said, and this is on page 10 of this version of the book that I have. The teachers told the children that this was their continent. Was discovered by the teachers told the children that this was when their continent was discovered by human beings. Actually, millions of human beings were already living full and imaginative lives on the continent in 1492. That was simply the year in which sea pirates began to cheat and rob and kill them. Here's another piece of evil nonsense which children were taught, that the sea pirates eventually created a government which became a beacon of freedom to human beings everywhere else. There were pictures and statues of this supposed imaginary beacon for children to see. It was sort of an ice cream cone on fire, and it looked like this. And he put a picture. Then he goes on to say, actually, the sea pirates who had the most to do with the creation of the new government owned human slaves. They used human beings for machinery, and even after slavery was eliminated, because it was so embarrassing, they and their descendants continued to think of ordinary beings as machines. So this is the beginning of this book. This book is about 3 characters. Kurt Vonnegut himself as the narrator. And then there's, sorry, let me go to the first chapter. There's him, the narrator, and then there's Kilgore Trout and Dwayne Hoover. Kilgore Trout is a writer, who considers himself a failure. During the time that he's writing, there isn't internet, clearly. So he can't just do an internet blog and release all this stuff that people consider amazing on the internet daily, or tweet it, or Instagram and Facebook it, whatever. Tumblr it, and so he's he sends out all this work to these different publishers, and they use his work in a bunch of different ways, and most of the time he's not paid. He doesn't know where his work ends up, and a lot of it ends up in porn, as narrative for porn. And he also draws illustrations for his short stories and his novels. So he writes short stories and novels, but he isn't paid a lot, and he lives in a dingy place with his parakeet. And again, he's not paid much for his work. Over the decades, he's sent out hundreds and hundreds of stories, and he doesn't keep copies of them. And once he sends them out, he doesn't really know much what happens to them. And then the other character, Dwayne, what is his name? Dwayne Hoover. He's a well-to-do, as they say in this book, or we would say now, rich businessman, and he finds himself kind of going crazy in this story. His wife committed suicide. He cheated on her with his... These are spoilers, and I really apologize. So if you haven't read this, you don't want to listen. He cheated on her with his secretary or whatever of his automobile, his used car company, and he has a gay son named Bunny. And in the story, he's losing his mind. He's trying to find the meaning of life, and it's really having an effect on his mental capabilities. He's literally losing it, and how the 2 characters interact is there's a big art show in the town in which David Hoover lives, and they called it it's Midland Midland somewhere, and they called it the asshole of the United States. Um, I I can't remember where exactly it is. I should know because I just read this book. But anyway, um, yeah, Midland City area in in the country, So it's a good book. I think he writes well. It flowed well for me. I liked the characters. There is a lot of racial slurs, but I think because you're aware, at least I was, that he was aware of the state of the United States and again race relations and all that stuff. I didn't really think he was a racist. I think he grew up in racist times and was using that as filler and narrative for the story. Did he need to? I don't know. Who am I to question his art? I actually like the book. I'm gonna read some other stuff by him to really delve into what I delve into his work as an artist, as a writer, and I want to develop an idea of who I think he is through his writing. I like him so far. I find him to be very similar to me, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because I've suffered and been depressed and all that stuff, and I have this kind of weird sense of humor, and I can kind of relate to him. But anywho, I'm gonna read more of his work. I don't even know what this is about. I don't even know if this is a review. This is just me talking about this book a bit, and I'm sorry if I gave spoilers, but I really liked it, and I'm glad that I read it. So thank you so much for watching. Thanks.